بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا عز وجل ويرضاه. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله، بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة وجاهد في الله حق الجهاد حتى توفاه الله سبحانه وتعالى، فترك أمته على المحجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك. فصلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سار على منهاجهم ومن سار على منوالهم إلى يوم الدين. ربي أدخلني مدخل صدق وأخرجني مخرج صدق واجعلني من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Imam al-Bukhari and Imam Muslim have both collected in their respective books on the authority of Alqamah, rahimahullah, from the Tabi'een. He is from the most prominent and from the most brilliant students of the Sahaba. And this man, Alqamah, he narrated that one day he was making Hajj and he was at Mina and he met two major companions at Mina. The first of those companions was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, and the second companion was Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu ardah. So all of a sudden, Uthman radiallahu anhu, he approached Ibn Mas'ud. And we know that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu was from the ulama of the Sahaba. He had a great deal of knowledge of the Quran, its recitation, and its modes, its tafsir. Rather, there's a time in which Ibn Mas'ud said that there isn't another companion who knows more about the reasons behind surahs and chapters and verses being sent down than me. He said that if I knew there was a man who existed who I could reach with my camel, or my horse, or on foot, or donkey, or mule, or boat, if I knew that there was another Sahabi out there that knew more of the reasons behind revelation, then I would travel towards him. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu was also from those companions who narrated over 700 hadiths. He was very close to being from the Saba al-Mukthirin, from the 7 chief narrators of hadith, those who narrated over 1,000 narrations. Ibn Mas'ud accepted Islam in the early days, and he stood in the company of the Prophet ﷺ for a great deal of time. And as we said before, he was from the most knowledgeable of the Sahaba, and he had a great deal of respect among the other companions. So Uthman radiallahu anhu, he approached him, and there's a reason why I'm giving you a little about Ibn Mas'ud's life, as you already know. We all know the status of Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu. He approached him, and he said, Ya Aba Abdurrahman. He said, O Abu Abdurrahman. In other words, he called him by his kunya. And this is a forgotten sunnah among many Muslims, an abandoned practice among many Muslims. Rather, many of us may not even know what a kunya is, let alone the sunnah to call your brother by his kunya, by his by name, Abu Fulan, Fulan. And the kunya is a means of respect, it's a means of honor, and it's a means of affection and closeness. Calling someone by their first name directly isn't the best. Isn't the most affectionate, even the most respectful way of addressing someone. But when you say, Ya Aba Abdullah, Ya Aba Abdurrahman, Ya Aba Na'ila. You know, many of the great ulama of the past, or Jibal, mountains of knowledge, and their students wouldn't call them Shaykh, they wouldn't call them Ya Ustad, they would call them Ya Aba Abdullah, such as Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah. So Uthman, he approached Ibn Mas'ud, and he said to him, Ya Aba Abdurrahman. So Ibn Mas'ud, obviously, Uthman got his attention. He said to him, Ala nuzawijuka shab aw jariyatan shabatan la'allaha tudhakkiruka bi ba'di ma mada min zamanik. He says, let us marry you off. Let us find you a young wife, and perhaps she will remind you of some of your past days. He says, perhaps she will remind you of some of your past days when you were younger, when you were stronger, when you didn't have the responsibilities that you have now. Perhaps this will help you out and you getting married and marrying to a younger sister. Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he said to that great Khalifa of the Muslims, Uthman, he says, لَإِن قُلْتَ ذَلِكَ, he says, if that's the case, if you're offering me marriage and you're encouraging me to get married to a young sister, he says, then indeed the Messenger of Allah ﷺ told us. The Messenger said what you just said. I heard this before from Muhammad ﷺ. And then he passed on a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, يا معشر الشباب من استطاع منكم الباءة فليتزوج فإنه أغض للبصر وأحصن للفرج ومن لم يستطع فعليه بالصوم فإنه له وجاه أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. He said, O assembly of youth, O young men, O young Muslims, O young females as well, anyone who can marry should do so. Anyone who has the ability, who has the desire to get married should get married. Why? Why can I not live single? Why should I get married and take on responsibilities at a young age? The Prophet ﷺ, because he was such a good teacher, he was such a beautiful instructor, he was such a marvelous cultivator, he was a murabbi, he made tarbiyah, he cultivated them. He answered the question before he was asked. He said, فَإِنَّهُ أَغَضُّ لِلْبَصَرِ, because marriage helps you to lower your gaze. It allows you to refrain from looking at things that you should look at. It allows you from losing self-control. He then says, and the second major benefit behind marriage, he says, وَأَحْسَنُ لِلْفَرْجِ, and it allows you to keep your chastity. It allows you to protect yourself from vice, from wrong, from immorality. The Messenger of Allah, he then gave further benefit, further instruction. He gave even more gems and jewels. He says, and those who cannot get married, those who do not have the ability to marry, then they should fast. For indeed, if they fast, then it will be a means of stifling one's desires. And the literal translation, the word-for-word translation is, it will act as a means of castration. As if a man becomes a eunuch. And a eunuch, in most cases, has no desires or temptations. A eunuch has no desires or temptations. So therefore, this beautiful hadith is full of benefits, etiquettes, and rulings. And not just to marriage. And not just to Muslim youth, but for every single Muslim, man, woman, and child. The first benefit that we take from this hadith, and before we begin into the benefits, it is very important for us to properly understand the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, just as it is vital for us to properly understand the Quran al-Kareem first and foremost. And there are many times in which incorrect practice of Islam, misunderstandings, extremism, fanaticism, and the list goes on of problems that come from poor understanding. Not lack of knowledge, not lack of information, but poor understanding. What is the proper way to understand this? What is meant by this hadith and what is not meant by that hadith? The Prophet ﷺ, he tells us in the famous narration of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan radiyallahu ta'ala anhu arda, man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fi din. وَإِنَّمَا أَنَا قَاسِمٌ وَاللَّهُ يُعْطِي. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, he whom Allah wants good for, she whom Allah wants good for, the slave that Allah wishes to bless and guide and place upon the sirat, Allah gives him or her understanding of the religion. The Prophet then says, all I do is pass out and distribute what Allah endows. Allah gives the knowledge, I just hand it out to the people. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrated, and the hadith is also in the Sahih, that the Prophet ﷺ says, An-nasu kama'adin. He says people are like minerals, people are like ores, people are like gold and silver and copper, things that people mine and take from out of the ground. He says, خِيَارُهُمْ فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ خِيَارُهُمْ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ إِذَا فَقُهُوا. He says the best of them in Jahiliyyah are the best of them in Islam if they seek knowledge, if they learn, and not just learn, but he says understanding and knowledge. And there's hadith after hadith after hadith about the importance of understanding. So, from the ways that you understand a hadith is something that's very similar to the way that you understand the Quran. And in the science of the Quran, we have that which is called asbabun nuzul. Why was a verse sent down? Why did Allah say what He said about this man and this woman, this battle? Abasa wa tawalla. He frowned and turned away. What does that mean? Why did Allah send down that verse? And most importantly, how does it translate into practicality? There was a blind man, came to the Prophet turned away from him. Why? And what do we benefit from it in our daily lives? You cannot truly value, nor appreciate, nor properly understand that verse, nor that surah, unless you know the reason why it was sent down. The reason why Allah sent down that verse. It was a happening, something happened in the time of the Prophet. The Prophet needed to know something. The Prophet did something which he shouldn't have done. A companion did something which was wrong, and Allah sent down revelation. And the same applies to the sciences of hadith, and that is what we call asbabul wurudi wa tahdith. Reasons behind the Prophet saying something, and reasons behind the companion passing it on to someone else. Why did the Prophet ﷺ say, وَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي? He who doesn't want my sunnah isn't from me. Why did he say those words? There's a reason why. Why did Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu narrate this hadith? He knew of the hadith. He heard from the Prophet, but it wasn't passed down to the next man until something happened. And that was when Uthman offered him to get married. Everybody understand this? We don't have much time for this right now. We've given many lectures on this before in many different places in masjids. It's a very, very important concept for every Muslim to understand. The aspiring student of knowledge, he who has memorized the Quran, he who knows Arabic, the Imam, the Sheikh, the scholar, even the everyday layman Muslim. Everybody has a specific level of understanding. And there are 4 levels of ta'weel, of interpretation. Some things every Muslim knows. Something is only known by those who know Arabic. Some things are only known by those who have specific knowledge. And some things are only known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Moving on. Uthman radiallahu anhu, he approached Ibn Mas'ud and he offered him what? To get married. That is why Ibn Mas'ud said what he heard from the Rasul al-Kareem alayhi salatu wasalam. And this has a direct link in understanding the hadith and misunderstanding the hadith. The narration clearly tells us, Ya ma'ashar al-shabab. It says, O assembly of youth. So when you read it in English, you're going to say that marriage is only recommended, it's only preferable, or only obligatory upon who? Youth. The story between Uthman and Ibn Mas'ud clearly proves that that is right or wrong. Which of the two? What did Uthman say to Ibn Mas'ud? He said to him, said that perhaps this young wife will do what? She'll remind you of your what? Of your past days. So obviously Ibn Mas'ud was what? Old or young? It was old. It was old. So the reason behind the hadith clearly excludes the misunderstanding. That marriage, its recommendation, and its benefit is not just for the young. Everybody understand this? And this is a beautiful example of the concept that we're trying to get across. Is that the story behind the hadith prevents you from understanding the hadith and misinterpreting the hadith. And there are other narrations which there are no stories behind. And the hadith is absolute as it states. Everybody understand this? Very important, and I hope that these words are clear. So that's the first benefit that we take from the story. The next benefit is that a righteous man, a pious man, a leader of people, it doesn't mean that he has to be harsh and stern. It doesn't mean that he has to be rigid and robotic and mechanical. It doesn't mean that you can't have a little humor or to be soft and kind and easygoing with your friends. It doesn't mean that. In other words, as if he walked up and says, listen, you pat him on the back once you get married. And it's the Khalifa of the Muslims. And Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu is a major alim from the Sahaba. So when we look at our current state, why do so many Muslim youth turn away from the masjid? Why do so many Muslim youth choose to do this and hang out with these people and listen to those people? Perhaps, oftentimes, it goes back to our akhlaq, how we deal with them. There's discipline in Islam. There are rules in Islam. It doesn't mean they have to be unnecessarily harsh and mean and rude. It doesn't mean that. Everybody understand this. It's a very important concept in Islamic psychology. The Prophet ﷺ had the most beautiful character. And he spoke on this level, and he spoke on that level. No one disliked him. The old companions, the young companions, the women from the companions. And one of the reasons why is because he spoke so beautifully. He disrespected no one. He berated no one. He belittled no one. He humbled himself for his companions, not like many of us. And there was a sister here in Guyana the other day. She said, we never ever get a chance or opportunity to sit with a sheikh. We never ever get a chance or opportunity to ask questions. We never get a chance to express our personal issues and problems to someone with knowledge. And that's a problem. And it's not just here in Guyana, in many places like this. So the Prophet ﷺ, his companions, they learned from him. Uthman ibn Mas'ud, he offered him marriage. Many people today, they would look at it as a bad thing, or something that you shouldn't talk about, or something that you shouldn't say, or you can't say this type of things. Perhaps she'll remind you of your what? Past days. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody understand this. The next benefit we take from this story is that in Islam, marriage is something that is fundamental. It's fundamental. A man being with a woman, not a man with a man. Not a woman with a woman. Not a man by himself. Not a woman by herself. Not a man with a friend or partner or lover. But husband and wife is something which is fundamental. And it was known by all of the Sahaba. And that's why that conversation took place between Uthman and Ibn Mas'ud. The next benefit we take from this hadith is that from the goals and objectives of getting married in Islam is not just pure spirituality. It's not just marrying someone just for righteousness. It's not just marrying a person just for religious benefits. But there's nothing wrong with getting married and having fun and enjoying your wife. Her character, her speech, her outward beauty, her akhlaq. And that's why Uthman offered him a young wife. In other words, a woman that never had experience with a man. A woman that doesn't have too much stress and problems. A woman who has energy. A woman who's going to talk and laugh with him and is going to make him what? Think about the good old days. Everybody understand this? It's a very important concept in Islam. There's some people when they get married, they say, no, only marry a woman that has deen and that's it. Only marry a woman for this reason. That is from the purposes of marriage. As the Prophet ﷺ said, تُنْكَحُ الْمَرْأَةُ لِأَرْبَعٍ. He says a woman can be married for 4 reasons. And he never just praised, nor did he condemn marrying a woman for her beauty, nor her wealth, nor her lineage and genealogy. But he said that the best is that the deen, a religious, pious girl. And just because she's religious and pious, it doesn't mean that she has to be totally unattractive. It doesn't mean that. Just because she's religious and pious doesn't mean that she has to be a woman that you can have no conversation with. Doesn't mean that. As many people think and misunderstand. But her dominant character, her most outstanding characteristic is what? Deen. Everybody understand this? A woman's dominant character, the first thing that people think about when they think about this woman is her beauty and not her deen, not her character. The first thing that you think about this brother, from all of the things that he does and says, is his wealth or his strength. There are dominant characteristics. And those dominant characteristics and strong points doesn't mean that a person has to be lacking in the others. Just like Islam. A person is specialized in the Quranic recitation. Doesn't mean that he's weak in Arabic. Doesn't mean he doesn't know anything from Hadith, but that's what he specializes in. And we all know that the Prophet ﷺ said, أَرْحَمُ أُمَّتِي لِأُمَّتِي Abu Bakr. He says, the most merciful of my nation to my nation is Abu Bakr. وَأَشَدُّهُمْ فِي اللَّهِ عُمَرُ. And the harshest of them is Umar. So was Umar not merciful and kind? Was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq not strong in face of the apostates and the munafiqeen? Of course they were. But the dominant character of Umar, the thing that was known when you think about Umar was what? Shidda. No games when it came to the deen. And the dominant thing about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was crying in the salah, was weeping. And the list goes on to the end of that beautiful hadith that we've explained in other classes. So back to our hadith. Uthman radiallahu anhu, he says, shall we not marry you to a young girl that will remind you of some of your previous days? Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he did not take offense to that offering. He did not take it as a means of disrespect. Rather, he took it as a means of brotherhood. Alhamdulillah, there's nothing wrong with that. He took it as a means of brotherhood. And then he confirmed what Uthman said. And he reestablished what advice he gave him. And he says, indeed, the Messenger of Allah told us. In other words, perhaps there was a time in which Uthman wasn't there. And he didn't hear what Ibn Mas'ud heard. And he memorized what Ibn Mas'ud had memorized. And what did the Prophet say? He said, Ya ma'ashar ash-shabab. He specifically addressed the youth. And he said, only the youth in the beginning. And that is because the youth are the future. The youth are tomorrow. Many of us, unfortunately, are stuck in our bad ways, stuck in our bad habits, stubborn. But the youth has a future. He has or she has a chance to change, to develop, to mature, and to learn from the mistakes of those who came before him. The youth has the ability to get wisdom for free. He can get the wisdom without the scar, without the scratch. And there are many old people, those who are elderly or mature or older, that's not the case. They have to learn the hard way. So the young person is the one who learns from the mistakes of others. Secondly, the Prophet he addressed the youth because the youth have an abundance of free time. They have abundance of energy, vigor, stamina. The youth have an overabundance of lack of wisdom and perhaps foolishness, because knowledge, wisdom, experience, these things normally come with age in most cases. And there are some times in which a young man or young woman could be extremely wise. And there are many times in which an old man or old woman could be extremely foolish. And there are many of the companions of the Messenger of Allah that barely had beards, that were masters of ilm. And Umar radiallahu anhu, when he was the Khalifa of the Muslims, those were many of his shura members. His shura members were the youth of the Sahaba. Those who had learned the Quran, those who were young, he would ask them for their advice. So there's not absolute, as many people think. Just because a person is old doesn't mean that he's wise. Just because a person is young does not mean that they are foolish. But in most cases, as the Prophet was made a prophet at 40, and that is the year of perfection, when your body is not physically weak yet, and your mind is at its peak of sharpness. So therefore, that's why the Prophet addressed the youth. That's why. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. What will be the case if the Prophet ﷺ lived in our time and he saw the trials and tribulations of the youth, and the battle that the youth have to fight, and the blows that are hurled against them through the phone, through the television, through the computer, through school, through the magazines, like nothing else in history. There was never a time in which the youth were under such a vicious attack more than in this century. So the Prophet says, "O youth." We also explained that it means older as well, but specifically to the youth. مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ مِنْكُمُ الْبَاءَةَ فَلْيَتَزَوَّجْ. Those who can should get married. Those who are of age, those who reach sexual maturity, those who have physical strength, those who have the basic needs and means of getting married financially, they should not delay. They should not put it off. They should not wait. College, buy my own house, buy my own car, this, that, so on and so on and so forth. 3, 4, 5, 6 years go by. That's not the Prophet's advice. I want to go overseas, I want to seek knowledge. On your law knows how many times we've been asked this question. Should I get married first? Should I go overseas? We say, seek help in Allah. Ista'in billah. And take the advice of the Nabi al-Karim. Getting married does not stop you from seeking knowledge. Seeking knowledge doesn't stop you from getting married. Getting married doesn't stop you from earning a living. Earning a living does not stop you from seeking knowledge. But there are sacrifices. And most of the ulama of the past, 99% of them were those who got married. And the ulama, the small number who did not get married, they were excluded situations. They were isolated instances. Whether it's Ibn Taymiyyah, or An-Nawawi, rahimahullah, or this one or that one. And we say on top of that, they're not the Prophet, ﷺ. No disrespect to them, but that's not the Nabi. The Nabi got married. He says, so the guidance to be taken is Muhammad's guidance, and not the guidance of this scholar and that scholar. Let alone the fact is that just because he got married, it doesn't mean other things. Khair inshallah, moving on. So the Prophet clearly commands us to get married. And there are many of the people of knowledge who held the view that marriage was mandatory. It was wajib. And most of the fuqaha of the past, they held the view that marriage was only recommended. It's recommended. And there's a third view, is that marriage is obligatory upon those who fear fitna. Those who are afraid, those who are unstable, and those who cannot bear the trials and tribulations, then they must what? Get married. Moving on to the next part of the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ, he gave tangible reasons why before he was asked. And it's another very important concept of tarbiyah in Islam. When you tell your children not to do something, explain to them why. When you tell your children to do something, explain to them why. And don't just say, don't do this, don't do that. Because they're going to grow up thinking, it's only for my father, only for my mother, only in the... No, don't do this because it angers Allah. Do this because it pleases Allah. Implement this because that's the sunnah. Stay away from this because that's not the sunnah. Explain to them the reasons. And there's so many hadiths in which the Prophet ﷺ forbade companions from something and he told them why. And there's so many hadiths in which the Prophet ﷺ ordered them to do something and he gave them the virtue and the hasanat that comes from doing that. Just as when the Prophet ﷺ forbade the companions from doing a jahili statement, a statement from jahiliyyah, he didn't just leave them hanging, but he gave them a substitution. He gave them a replacement. The Prophet said, do not swear by your forefathers. And he said, swear by Allah. The Prophet ﷺ, he told the companions, when they used to say, As-salamu ala Allah, they send salutations to Allah in prayer. He says, don't say that. However, say, As-salamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. Prayers upon us and all of Allah's righteous slaves. And it's hadith after hadith after hadith. Is that the Prophet told the people not to do something, and he gave them a replacement. Many of us today as husbands, as fathers, as teachers, as wives, we tell our children, don't do something. And then we leave them blank like that. Do this. Make sure you do it every day. You don't explain why. That's not the best way, nor is that the way of Muhammad ﷺ. And these words, if we properly understand them, they are golden. They're golden in the success of the Muslim youth. The Prophet ﷺ, he explained and he was generous without being asked. He says two main reasons why you should get married. Number one, فَإِنَّهُ أَغَضُّ لِلْبَصَرِ. And we know that the eyes, as some people say, are the doorway to the soul. That's not necessarily an Islamic statement, nor is it necessarily Islamically rejected. And there are many things that pertain to the eyes that have a direct connection to the heart. The eye and the soul, whether it's the ayn, the evil eye, hasad, envy and jealousy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he forbids our children from entering upon us whenever they want to, when they reach a certain age, in Surah An-Nur. And the reason behind that is that when a child sees something at a young age, it's going to have a direct effect on the mind, on the heart, on the soul. And there may be one thing that a person sees that never leaves their mind. And there are some people who say that it takes 7 years for an image to leave your mind. Some people say this. 7 years for an image to leave one's mind. But we don't get into that right now. The point that we're trying to get to is the eye, the gaze, and the connection to the heart. Light and darkness. And this is something that's not from me. It was mentioned by Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah in a few places of his books, in which he said that there is a secret behind Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanding the believers to lower their gaze, men and women. And then later on, Allah mentioning Allahu nur samawati wal ard. He says Allah is the nur of the heavens and the earth. Allah himself is nur. Allah gives nur. Allah provides nur to everything in the heavens and the earth. That verse was mentioned after the verses of lowering the gaze and the verses of hijab. Allah says, tell the believers to lower their gaze, male and female. ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. That is pure for them. In other words, pure for the eye, pure for the mind, pure for the heart, pure for the soul, and pure for the physical body. So Ibn Qayyim said is that perhaps when a man lowers his gaze and he doesn't look at everything and anything what he's not supposed to look at, he says perhaps Allah will give him true nur. And he will have the furqan, and he will have the firasa, as some people will translate to mean a third eye, or a sixth sense. In other words, divine intuition, to see the truth and to see the falsehood, to see that which is beneficial and to see that which is harmful or even for a person to feel danger before it happens. Wallahu dhul fadl al-azim. Allah is the possessor of expansive bounty. There's no restriction on Allah can give a slave. So the concept of the eyes, of the basar, what they lead to, as the Prophet ﷺ said in another authentic hadith in the Sahih, he says that the eyes make zina, and the other body parts, they make zina. He says what? وَالْقَلْبُ يَتَمَنَّى, and the heart hopes and wishes. He says وَالْفَرْجُ يُصَدِّقُ ذَلِكَ أَوْ يُكَذِّبُهُ, and the last step, starting with the eyes, he said, is one's private parts. He says they either translate it to deeds or they hold back. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ says that marriage allows you to lower your gaze. And as I said before, these are only a few issues in limited amount of time. The concept of the eyes and how important the eye is in Islam, and how important it is for you not to see what you're not supposed to see. The hadith after hadith rulings about what? The eyes. The Prophet ﷺ, he then said, وَأَحْسَنُ لِلْفَرْجِ, and it's pure for one's chastity. And the literal translation is safer for one's sexual organ. It says a hisan, is a citadel, a fortress. In other words, marriage prevents you from fornication, from adultery. Marriage prevents a person from homosexuality, from lesbianism, from sodomy, from masturbation, from pornography. Anything that is a vice of one's sexual desires, marriage is a stone wall between you and between those vices. And only Allah knows the amount of destruction that comes when a person loses control over his sexual desires. Only Allah knows. And this is something that is accepted and acknowledged to Muslims and non-Muslims. And if you don't believe me, then read. Read the books. Go on the internet, read what the people say about this concept, about eyesight, and about one's sexuality that loses control. The Prophet ﷺ, because he received divine guidance from Allah, and Allah explained to him and taught him, and he gave him a key for everything. Those that will come in the future, those who cannot marry, for one reason or another. He says, those who can't marry, they shouldn't lose hope. They shouldn't rush to haram. They shouldn't do this. He says they should do one thing, and that is fast. Fast. What is the purpose of fasting? To starve yourself, to kill yourself, to go thirsty? That's part of it. And it also is affecting your desires as well. But fasting is a means of you doing that to your nafs. Tahtim al-nafs. It's smashing your nafs. Locking up your nafs. Disobeying your nafs. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm not going to eat or drink. I have the desire for this, but I'm not going to do it because I'm fasting. My nafs lawama, that blameworthy soul. Inna nafsa la'amaratun bisu, as Yusuf a.s. said. Yusuf said this. He says the nafs often commands a person with evil. So when you fast, as if you're locking your nafs up, as if you're smashing your nafs, and you're doing away with it commanding you and leading you around.